I'm Sayeed Choudhury, the Executive Director of the Open Forum for AI, or OFAI. OFAI is an academic and nonprofit-led partnership that is aiming to bend the arc toward human-centric AI with openness as a design principle. So why academic and nonprofit? Because as digital infrastructure, both the internet and the web benefited tremendously from a triad, or I've been told to say a trinity here, of academia, industry, and government. Why human-centric AI? Because AI should serve humanity and not vice versa. And why openness? Because the internet and the web also benefited tremendously, and so did all of we, from open protocols like TCP/IP and HTTP. So openness as a principle for AI's infrastructure could hopefully have the same kind of benefits. Every working group, we have 8 in OFAI, is focused on this framework idea of openness in AI, a socio-technical framework that takes a comprehensive approach to openness. We don't necessarily assume openness is beneficial in every case, so we're critical in that regard as well. But in cases where it does show benefits, how do we foster that in terms of developing of AI? We think more broadly in terms of open governance, not only just open source, and we are looking at the context in which openness matters through these 6 W questions that you tend to ask. We have researchers, practitioners, community members, policy experts, so a very diverse group of partners and individuals throughout the US, Europe, and in Asia. So I'm going to show you a screenshot from Hugging Face, which I check probably more than I should, but on a regular basis to get, in some sense, a pulse, in my opinion, of what is happening with openness in AI. This is the latest chart, or maybe 2 days ago, whenever I turn my slides in. The latest chart of trending, if you look at most downloads, if you look at most likes, you will see very interesting trends in terms of what models are being adopted. Claire alluded to this in her remarks. Some of these models are Chinese. Interesting, we're starting to see some Indian models join these lists. Falcon, which comes out of the United Arab Emirates, is on some of these lists. So you're not going to see a lot of the big tech US companies on these lists. And someone said to me, well, that's not fair because they're not open models. I went, that's exactly my point. Is that a feature or is that a bug? I will also point out that there is actually growing interest in this in the US. You may not think that would be the case. This is something called the ATOM Project, or the American Truly Open Models. Many of the people who have signed this come from the private sector. Many of them come from academia, but there are companies like NVIDIA, former people at OpenAI, so on, who are saying even the US needs to foster more open models. Now, full disclosure, the arguments they make are about US competitiveness. But that's not the reason why I'm pointing this out. I'm pointing this out because I think there's actually an opportunity to take this message of openness even within the US. I want to bring to your attention a model that's being developed out of Kenya called Amini. And this is a model that's an emphasis on the global south, particularly around the issues of protecting the data that's being used from the global south. You can see that there are over 25 countries at this point using this model. I really appreciate Claire pointing out Mark Carney's comments at the World Economic Forum. I would encourage you to look at that. We have a split view on that in the US, I'll just put it that way. But I would say one way to think about his comments is the geopolitical centroid of the world is shifting. We often think of AI in the context of the US, Europe, and China. There's a lot of activity happening outside of those regions as well. And it's really important to keep that in mind. This is a diagram from a paper that was a result of a convening at Columbia University in February of 2024. I believe Columbia, Mozilla, and the Omidyar Network funded that workshop. It was called the Columbia Convening. There's a link to the paper at the bottom there. It's called Toward a Framework for Openness and Foundation Models. And they produced this figure, which really in many ways inspired the work of OFAI and continues to do so. I think it's a useful figure for a few reasons, but I also think it's been 2 years since that convening happened. A lot has happened in AI since that time. We can revisit this figure and think about what an open technology stack might look like for AI. On the left, what you see are the engineering or artifact sides of AI. On the right are what you see the attributes, which they think of as things like documentation, licenses, model cards, and so on. So a few things that I think that have happened in the last 2 years, we have more understanding of the left side of this diagram. And when you think about the kinds of small models that Claire had alluded to, or that you might see on a Hugging Face or Omni, we have agents. The orchestration of models, smaller models, and those agents is giving us a more holistic and comprehensive view of AI. I'm not picking on this group because 2 years ago, it made sense to focus on foundation models. But I think today, foundation models is just one piece of that stack. So we can take a broader view of that left side of the diagram, and we have components we can now start to think about being part of this diagram. Maybe equally important, we're starting to see the development of protocols. So when I talked about the internet and the web and those protocols, they began in many ways with the discussions of that protocol layer. And I think that was really important. That isn't what happened with AI. Now, one thing to really remember about AI is, these are not my words. When OpenAI published the paper about the first ChatGPT, they called it an experiment. And they said, we want your feedback. This is why we're releasing this. And then suddenly they had 1 million users and the world changed. And I'll be totally honest with you. If somebody came to me with billions of dollars and said, can you solve this problem and create something that's general purpose technology? I probably would have said yes, right? I would have figured there's enough smart people and I can go hire them and so on and so on. And if you give me enough data, if you give me enough compute, yeah, sure, we can do this. But it hasn't happened, right? We don't have this general purpose technology. We don't have artificial general intelligence. The experiment has not resulted in what the null hypothesis was trying to explore. So let's keep that in mind as we think about this open technology stack. And the last thing I want to say is this conversation around sovereignty, which is really important. I was reminded yesterday, and I really appreciate this, that one of the reasons people are thinking about national AI models is the preservation and expression of languages, right? We certainly don't want to reinforce this idea that everything has to be in English. That is a very important point. But I will also ask, what's an optimal number of national models, right? We don't want one model to rule them all. I understand that. But do we want one model for every country? I would say the optimal number is probably somewhere in between. I would also say not every country has the resources, right, to build a national model. So I tend to think more about agency, and I know that word is used interchangeably, but when I'm talking about agency, I'm fundamentally talking about interoperability. Can I pick and choose and swap out components as I need them? And can I swap them as technology changes, as policies change, or we learn more about safety or lack thereof of these models? And can we swap those components? Can we build those bridges and roads, not thinking that I have to do this very deeply in a vertical way, but much more in an expansive kind of horizontal layer? So OFAI is going to hold a series of workshops over this year to explore this question of what an open technology stack might look like. And we're hoping that in the fall of 26, we would have, depending on what we hear, either version 1.0 or 0.1, and unveil that and then invite people to keep building on that. And we would want to make this a global effort. And I'm really thrilled that we're starting here in Dublin and very eager to work with ADAPT and other folks throughout the Irish ecosystem. So thank you for your time.